The sun hung low over the Montana Territory, casting long shadows across the weathered fence posts of the Double R Ranch. Dust motes danced in the amber light filtering through the barn's open doors as Jake, Lone Ranger, Riley dismounted his weary horse after 3 weeks on the trail. The bounty he'd been tracking had finally been brought to justice, but the satisfaction felt hollow against the ache in his bones and the deeper loneliness that had become his constant companion. At 32, Jake had earned his reputation as one of the finest trackers west of the Mississippi. His weathered hands and sun-darkened skin told stories of countless days under the open sky, while his steel-gray eyes held the wisdom of a man who'd seen both the beauty and brutality of frontier life. The ranch had been his sanctuary for the past 5 years, a place where he could find peace between jobs and tend to his small herd of cattle. But as he led his horse toward the barn, something felt different. The air itself seemed charged with an energy he couldn't name. The barn doors creaked as he pushed them wider, and what he saw stopped him dead in his tracks. 2 young Cherokee women lay entwined in the hay, their long black hair mingling like silk ribbons in the golden light. They were kissing with the desperate tenderness of lovers who feared each moment might be their last, completely lost in each other's embrace. Jake's boots scraped against a loose board, and the women sprang apart like startled deer. The taller of the two, barely 20 with high cheekbones and eyes dark as midnight, positioned herself protectively in front of her companion. Her hand moved instinctively to the knife at her belt. "Easy there," Jake said softly, raising his hands to show he meant no harm. "This is my barn, but you're welcome to shelter here." The second woman peered around her protector's shoulder. She was perhaps 18, with gentle features and an aura of quiet strength that reminded Jake of still water running deep. Both wore traditional Cherokee clothing that had seen better days, and he could see the exhaustion etched in their faces. "We mean no trouble, cowboy," the taller woman said, her English accented but clear. "We will leave. Now hold on." Jake removed his hat, running fingers through his sandy hair. "I'm Jake Riley, and this is my ranch. You look like you've been traveling hard. When's the last time you ate?" The women exchanged glances, and Jake saw something pass between them, a communication deeper than words. It was the same look he'd witnessed moments before, filled with love and understanding. "I'm Ayanna," the taller woman finally said, though her posture remained defensive. "This is Enola. We have been traveling for many days." "From where?" Enola spoke for the first time, her voice soft as morning mist. "From our people. We cannot return." Jake nodded slowly. He'd heard stories of tribal members cast out for various reasons, sometimes for breaking tradition, sometimes for challenging authority. But looking at these 2 women, seeing the way they unconsciously moved closer to each other, he suspected their exile had more personal reasons. "Well, you're safe here," he said, meaning every word. "Let me get you some food and water. We can talk more after you've rested." As Jake prepared a simple meal of beans, hardtack, and coffee over the kitchen fire, he found his thoughts returning to the scene in the barn. There had been something beautiful about their embrace, pure and honest in a way that made his chest tighten with an emotion he couldn't name. In his 32 years, he'd never seen love like that, unguarded and complete. He'd had his share of encounters with saloon girls and even a brief engagement to a banker's daughter in Denver, but nothing had ever felt real. Nothing had ever made him want to build a life with another person. He'd always figured he was just meant to be alone, that some men were built for solitude. But watching Ayanna and Enola together had stirred something in him, not jealousy, but a longing for that kind of connection. When he returned to the barn carrying a tray of food, he found them sitting close together, whispering in Cherokee. They fell silent as he approached, but he didn't miss the way their hands remained intertwined. "Thank you," Enola said as he set the tray before them. "You are kind to strangers." "Not so strange," Jake replied, settling cross-legged on a hay bale. "We're all just people trying to find our way." As they ate, the story emerged in fragments. Ayanna was the daughter of a Cherokee medicine man, raised to be strong and independent. Enola was from a family of farmers, gentle and artistic. They had grown up in the same village, best friends who became something more as they came of age. "Our people have many traditions," Ayanna explained, her dark eyes distant. "But love between women, this is not accepted by all. Some of the elders said we brought shame to our families." My father wanted to arrange a marriage for me, Enola added quietly, to a man from another tribe. When I refused. When we refused to deny our hearts, Iona corrected, taking Enola's hand, we became outcasts. So we left. Jake was quiet for a long moment, processing their words. He'd known men who preferred the company of other men. It wasn't unheard of on the frontier, though it was rarely spoken of openly. But these women had given up everything for love, had chosen exile over living a lie. "Where will you go?" he asked. The women looked at each other uncertainly. "We do not know," Iona admitted. "We hope to find work in one of the towns, but two Cherokee women without family or references won't find it easy," Jake finished. He'd seen enough prejudice to know the challenges they'd face. "We can work," Enola said eagerly. "I can cook, sew, tend gardens. Iona knows horses and can track like any man." "I don't doubt it," Jake said. "Question is, would you be willing to work here?" The offer surprised him as much as it did them. He'd lived alone for years, preferred his own company to the complications that came with other people. But something about these women called to him, their courage, their dignity, the love they shared that burned bright enough to light up the darkness. "Here." Iona's eyes narrowed slightly. "What would you expect in return?" Jake held up his hands. "Honest work for honest pay. I've got more land than one man can handle, and cattle that need tending. The house has 2 extra bedrooms. You'd be safe here, free to live as you choose." "Why would you help us?" Enola asked softly. Jake was quiet for a moment, searching for the right words. "Because everyone deserves a chance to be happy. And because—" He paused, then decided on honesty. "Because I'm tired of being alone." Over the following days, Jake learned more about his unexpected guests. Iona was indeed skilled with horses. She could gentle the wildest Mustang with patience and understanding that bordered on mystical. She also possessed a fierce intelligence and a dry sense of humor that caught Jake off guard. Enola revealed herself to be a gifted healer, knowledgeable in both Cherokee medicine and practical frontier remedies. She transformed Jake's sparse garden into something approaching abundance and filled the house with the scents of herbs and wildflowers. But it was watching them together that affected Jake most deeply. He'd seen plenty of marriages on the frontier, unions of convenience, partnerships for survival, even matches built on genuine affection. But what Iona and Enola shared was something rarer. They moved around each other with unconscious grace, communicated with glances and touches, and supported each other with unwavering loyalty. It made him ache with longing and wonder if he'd ever find something similar. The answer came unexpectedly on a warm evening in late summer. Jake had been mending fence when a sudden thunderstorm rolled in, soaking him to the skin. He returned to the house to find Iona and Enola in the kitchen, teaching each other card games and laughing like schoolchildren. "You look like a drowned rat," Iona observed with a grin. "Feel like one too," Jake admitted, dripping on the wooden floor. "Go change," Enola said, already moving toward the stove. "I'll make hot coffee." When Jake returned in dry clothes, he found them at the kitchen table with 3 cups waiting. It was a small gesture, but it made him feel included in their circle for the first time. "Jake," Enola said hesitantly as they sat together, "may I ask you something?" "Of course. Have you ever loved someone your people said you shouldn't?" The question hit closer to home than Jake expected. He thought of Sarah, the banker's daughter in Denver, and how everyone had said they were perfect together. He thought of the saloon girls he'd known, relationships that were expected and accepted but ultimately meaningless. He thought of the loneliness that had driven him to the frontier in the first place. "I've never loved anyone the way you two love each other," he said finally. "But I understand feeling like an outsider." "Is that why you became the Lone Ranger?" Iona asked. "Because you didn't fit?" Jake smiled at the nickname that had followed him across 3 territories. "Maybe. Or maybe I just needed to find where I belonged." "And have you found it?" Enola's question was gentle but probing. Jake looked around the kitchen, at the wildflowers Enola had placed on the windowsill, at Iona's saddle resting by the door, at the two women who had somehow made his house feel like a home. "I think maybe I have." The moment stretched between them, full of possibility and unspoken understanding. Jake had never imagined that love could come in forms other than what he'd been taught, but watching Ayanna and Enola had opened his eyes to new ways of connection. "Jake," Ayanna said softly, "what if we told you that Cherokee culture understands love differently than white culture? That some of our people can love both men and women, and this too is part of the sacred circle?" Jake's heart began to beat faster. "I'd say that sounds like wisdom to me." Enola reached across the table and touched his hand. "And what if we told you that love doesn't always come in pairs? That sometimes the spirits bring together souls who belong as three instead of two?" Jake looked at their joined hands, his weathered and scarred from years of hard work, theirs smooth and strong. For the first time in his life, he felt the possibility of truly belonging somewhere. "I'd say the spirits might be smarter than the rest of us," he replied. That night, for the first time since their arrival, the three of them sat on the porch together watching the stars. Jake had always found peace in the vast Montana sky, but sharing it with Ayanna and Enola made it feel infinite with possibility. "In Cherokee tradition," Enola said quietly, "we believe that some souls are bound together across many lifetimes. They find each other again and again, in different forms, different combinations." "Like us?" Jake asked. "Like us," Ayanna confirmed, her hand finding his in the darkness. The first kiss happened naturally, as if it had always been inevitable. Jake wasn't sure who moved first. Perhaps they all did, drawn together by forces beyond understanding. But suddenly Enola's lips were soft against his, and Ayanna's hand was warm on his cheek, and everything he thought he knew about love expanded to include this perfect moment. When they broke apart, Jake expected awkwardness or confusion, but instead he felt only rightness. This was what he'd been searching for without knowing it. Not just love, but the completion of a circle he hadn't known was broken. "Is this what you want?" he asked, needing to be certain. "We have wanted this since the first day," Ayanna admitted. "But we feared you would not understand. We feared you would send us away," Enola added. Jake pulled them both closer, marveling at how perfectly they fit against him. "I could never send you away. You've made this place a home." The weeks that followed were a revelation. Jake discovered that love with three people didn't divide his heart, it multiplied it. Each relationship was unique. With Ayanna, he found passion and challenge, someone who matched his strength and pushed him to be better. With Enola, he found peace and healing, someone who soothed his restless spirit and showed him beauty in simple moments. Together, the three of them created something entirely new. They worked the ranch as partners, each contributing their unique skills. Ayanna trained horses and helped with the cattle, her natural understanding of animals making her invaluable. Enola tended their growing garden and served as the ranch's unofficial doctor, her healing knowledge saving them countless trips to town. Jake handled the business side and the heavier labor, but found himself relying on their judgment in all decisions. In the evenings, they would sit together sharing stories of their different worlds. Jake told them about his childhood in Missouri, about learning to shoot and track from his grandfather, about the loneliness that had driven him west. Ayanna shared Cherokee legends and taught them about the natural world from her people's perspective. Enola sang traditional songs in a voice like honey and gold, and painted beautiful images on scraps of leather and wood. But it was the quiet moments that Jake treasured most, waking up between them in the large bed they now shared, watching them braid each other's hair, seeing Ayanna's face soften with tenderness when she looked at Enola, feeling Enola's hand slip into his as they walked. The first real test of their unconventional family came in early autumn, when Jake's nearest neighbor, Tom Garrett, rode over with news and gossip. "Heard you got yourself some Cherokee women working for you," Tom said, his tone carefully neutral. "That causing you any trouble?" Jake chose his words carefully. "Ayanna and Enola are good workers and fine people. No trouble at all. Just wondering, since there's been talk in town. Some folks saying it ain't proper, a white man living alone with two Indian women. You know how people are." Jake felt his jaw tighten. "People can think what they want. What happens on my ranch is my business." Tom raised his hands. "No offense meant, Jake. Just thought you should know what's being said. Might be wise to clarify the situation. Let folks know they're just hired help." After Tom left, Jake found Ayanna and Enola in the garden, their faces carefully blank in the way he'd learned meant they were hiding deep emotion. "You heard?" he asked. "We heard," Ayanna confirmed. "Perhaps it would be better if we moved on. We do not wish to bring you trouble." Jake stepped between them, taking a hand from each. "The only trouble would be if you left. I don't care what anyone in town thinks." "But your reputation," Enola began. "My reputation is built on being an honest man who stands by his word. I told you this was your home, and I meant it. Even if it costs you business, other friendships." Ayanna pressed. Jake was quiet for a moment, thinking about the life he'd built, the respect he'd earned, the place he'd carved out for himself in this harsh territory. Then he looked at the two women who had filled the empty spaces in his heart and knew there was no choice to make. "Some things are worth more than reputation," he said firmly. "Love is one of them." The talk in town did increase over the following weeks. Some customers were cooler in their dealings with Jake, and he noticed fewer invitations to social gatherings. But he also discovered unexpected allies, other outcasts and independent spirits who respected his right to live as he chose. More importantly, the gossip seemed to strengthen the bond between the three of them. They moved from simply sharing space to truly building a life together. They made plans for expanding the ranch, talked about the future, and began to think of themselves not as three separate people who happened to love each other, but as a family. The crisis came in late October, when Enola fell seriously ill with a fever that seemed to come from nowhere and worsened by the hour. Jake rode hard to town for the doctor, but Dr. Morrison was away delivering a baby and wouldn't return for days. "There's nothing we can do but wait," Jake said desperately as he held Enola's burning hand. She was barely conscious, her breathing shallow and labored. "There is something," Ayanna said quietly. "Cherokee healing practices. But I would need specific herbs, and they don't grow here." "Where do they grow?" "In the sacred places of my people. A day's ride north." Jake didn't hesitate. "Then go. I'll stay with her." "Jake, if I return to Cherokee lands, they might not let me leave again. And if they discover why I need the healing plants, then we'll face that when it comes. Right now, Enola needs those herbs." Ayanna's eyes filled with tears. "If something happens to me..." "Nothing will happen to you. And if it does, Enola and I will come for you. We're family now. We don't leave family behind." Ayanna rode out before dawn, and Jake settled in for the longest day of his life. He bathed Enola's fevered brow, forced water between her cracked lips, and talked to her constantly even though she couldn't respond. He told her about his dreams for their ranch, about the children he hoped they might raise together someday, about how much she and Ayanna had changed his life. "You have to fight," he whispered as the sun began to set. "You have to come back to us. Ayanna's risking everything to save you, and I can't lose either of you. Not now that I know what love really is." Ayanna returned just after midnight, her horse lathered with sweat and her saddlebags full of mysterious plants and roots. She worked through the night, brewing teas and creating poultices with the focused intensity of someone fighting for a loved one's life. "Will she be all right?" Jake asked as Ayanna spooned bitter-smelling liquid between Enola's lips. "I don't know," Ayanna admitted, exhaustion clear in her voice. "This is powerful medicine, but she is very sick. We can only wait and hope." They took turns watching over Enola through the next 2 days, neither willing to leave her side for long. Jake found himself praying to gods he'd never believed in, making bargains with the universe, promising anything if only Enola would recover. On the third morning, her fever broke. Jake woke to find Enola's eyes open and clear, looking between him and Ayanna with a weak but genuine smile. "Did I miss anything interesting?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Jake laughed through tears he didn't remember shedding. "Just Ayanna saving your life and me discovering I can't live without either of you." "Good," Enola said, reaching up to touch his face. "I was hoping you'd figure that out eventually." As Enola recovered, Jake learned about Ayanna's journey to the sacred healing grounds. She'd been challenged by Cherokee warriors, questioned by elders, and ultimately forced to explain her need for the rare plants. "I told them the truth," she said simply. That I loved two people who had become my family, and that one of them was dying. My grandmother's sister spoke for me. She said love that strong was its own sacred thing, and the plants should be given. What about your exile? Jake asked. Iona smiled sadly. It stands. But Grandmother Singing Crow said I had found my true path, even if it led away from our people. She gave me her blessing. That blessing seemed to change something fundamental in their relationship. Where before they had been cautious, worried about the future and what others might think, now they embraced their unconventional family with fierce pride. Jake legally added both women's names to the ranch deed, making them full partners in everything he owned. They built an addition to the house with a larger bedroom and a workshop where Enola could practice her healing arts. Iona started a horse training business that quickly gained renown throughout the territory. But more than the practical changes, they grew into their love. Jake learned to braid hair and speak basic Cherokee. Iona adopted some of Jake's tracking techniques and taught him to read the subtle signs of weather and wildlife. Enola painted portraits of them both and created a garden that provided medicines for half the territory. They faced challenges, of course. Some neighbors remained hostile, and there were occasional confrontations in town. But they also found acceptance in unexpected places, and gradually earned respect for their integrity and hard work. The greatest test came the following spring, when a group of Cherokee warriors arrived at the ranch. Jake's hand moved instinctively to his gun, but Iona stepped forward calmly. "Brother," she greeted the lead warrior in Cherokee. "Sister," he replied, then switched to English. "I am Standing Bear, son of Medicine Crow. I come with a message from our people." Jake tensed, fearing this was the moment their happiness would end. But Standing Bear's next words surprised him. "The elders have reconsidered your exile. You and your wife may return home if you wish." Iona glanced at Jake and Enola, then back at her brother. "My home is here now. These are my people." Standing Bear studied the three of them, taking in their easy familiarity, the way they unconsciously moved to support each other. "You have found happiness?" "More than I ever dreamed possible," Iona replied. "Then the spirits have guided you well." Standing Bear turned to Jake. "You are the one called Lone Ranger? Some call me that. You care for my sister? And her woman friend?" Jake met his gaze steadily. "With my life." Standing Bear nodded slowly. "Then you are brother to me as well. Our people speak of your honor, even if they do not understand your heart." Before leaving, Standing Bear presented them with gifts, a beautiful blanket woven by their grandmother, ceremonial knives for protection, and a painted hide that told the story of their love in Cherokee symbols. "Your story will be remembered," he told them. "Not as shame, but as courage." That evening, as they sat on their porch watching the sun set over the Montana wilderness, Jake reflected on the strange turns his life had taken. A year ago, he'd been a lonely man convinced he was meant for solitude. Now he was part of something he'd never imagined possible, a love that transcended conventional boundaries and created its own perfect world. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked, arms around both women as they watched the stars emerge. "Giving up everything you knew?" "We gave up nothing that mattered," Enola said softly. "We found everything that did." "Besides," Iona added with a hint of a smile, "someone had to civilize the famous Lone Ranger. Couldn't let you stay lonely forever." Jake laughed, pulling them closer. "I was never really alone. I just hadn't found my family yet." As winter approached, bringing with it the cozy intimacy of long evenings by the fire, Jake realized that their unconventional love had become the stuff of local legend. Travelers would sometimes stop by the ranch, curious to meet the trio who had defied convention and found happiness. Some came expecting scandal and left impressed by their obvious devotion and the peaceful prosperity of their home. Jake no longer thought of himself as the Lone Ranger. How could he, when he was surrounded by such love? Instead, he became simply Jake Riley, husband and partner to two remarkable women who had taught him that the heart's capacity for love was limitless. On Christmas Eve, as snow fell softly outside their warm home, Jake gave voice to a thought that had been growing in his mind for months. "I want to marry you both," he said suddenly, causing Iona and Enola to look up from the socks they were mending by lamplight. The law won't recognize it, Ayanna pointed out practically. I don't care about the law's recognition. I care about ours. Jake moved to kneel before them both. In every way that matters, we're already married. But I want to make it official in our hearts, in our home. I want to promise before whatever gods are listening that I'll love and protect you both for as long as I live. Enola's eyes filled with tears. Yes, she whispered. Yes, Ayanna agreed, her voice stronger but no less emotional. They held their ceremony on New Year's Day, with only the Montana wilderness as witness. Jake had carved 3 simple gold bands, and they exchanged vows they wrote themselves. Ayanna spoke in Cherokee, then translated her promise to honor their love in all its forms. Enola sang a traditional song about souls finding each other across time. Jake pledged his protection, his fidelity, and his gratitude for being allowed into their extraordinary love. As they slipped the rings onto each other's fingers, Jake felt a completeness he'd never imagined possible. This was his real life beginning, not the solitary existence he'd thought was his destiny, but a rich, complex, beautiful partnership that would last whatever storms might come. Years later, when travelers asked Jake about his unusual marriage, he would smile and tell them simply, "Love doesn't always come in the packages we expect. But when it comes, you don't question the wrapping. You just hold on tight and thank the stars for the gift." And under those vast Montana stars, with Ayanna's hand in his left and Enola's in his right, Jake Riley knew he'd found his true calling at last, not as a lone ranger riding toward the sunset, but as part of a family riding toward the sunrise, together.